What was the inspiration for Rendezvous with God? Like, where did that idea come from?
I I teach the life of Jesus a couple of times a year at a school, and I'm constantly saddened by how we've turned him into a philosophy instead of a person, how we've varnished him up with all sorts of coats of I don't know what, and making him inaccessible, kind of like we've insulated ourselves from him. So I wanted to write a series that stripped away the varnish, that stripped away the insulation, and put him back in our face as if we were really spending time with him. So yeah, that was the point. Certainly not to in any way decrease his godliness, but just to decrease the buffer zone that we keep between him. So he's in the series. He's whimsical. He teases our character from time to time, and as our character grudgingly stumbles into deeper and deeper holiness. So it's part comedy, but again, never nothing irreverent. But if we make fun of anybody, it's our own knuckleheadedness.
Do you enjoy writing it? It seems like there's a lot of joy that permeates through the pages of the novels.
Yeah, it's some of that has to do with I want to make sure I word this correctly so you don't think I'm trying to write uh, another book in the Bible, but I've never written this way before. I've written probably about 120, 130 books. I wanted to try something new. So instead of spending time, okay, Lord, I've now given you my 45 minutes of morning time. Now run along and run the universe and let me write. But I've prayed, so I know that, I want to try something else. I want to turn the writing into a type of prayer. So I would purposefully write myself into an impossible corner where God couldn't possibly come up with an answer, and then wait on him. And it became almost a type of conversation. I pretend he sits usually back there, and I would write myself into a corner, and then I would turn and go, okay, any ideas? And the stuff that would bubble up in my head was way beyond my pay grade. And so, yeah, the joy is coming from at least in my imagination, or however you want to do the theology, I don't care. But is this give and take relationship, a conversation that I have with Jesus as we're busy writing it?
So who is Will Thomas then? Because in reading it, a lot of times with a protagonist like this, the protagonist may be a mirror image of the author himself. Is that the case with Will Thomas, or is this? I know you've tried to portray him a little bit as like, okay, it's you. Okay,
Don't tell anybody though.
okay.
No, it's well, gee, what is my first name? Bill. Yeah, and then there's Doubting Thomas. Oh, wow. What that works, doesn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, it really was a lot of me. The good stuff, not the bad stuff. I had to dream up, of course, because I'm so perfect, as my family will tell you. But yeah, it's a lot of me. It's again, it's my exploration into the character of Jesus. I know the New Testament, the accounts backwards and forwards. Like I said, I've been teaching it in school settings for years. So I just wanted to get into his personality, and to do that, I used it as I exploited him. I used me to ask him questions, and they said, no, I'm doing this for the book, right? Like I can fool him, right? So, so yeah, there's a lot of it in me. The good news is you're not going to publish this; nobody will ever see it, so I can go ahead and confess it, right?
Mhm. Well, is that similar to like to your own story, how you came to faith? Like as far as
No,
being
no.
popular and much beloved, and then just throwing it all away in order to because Jesus had found you.
Uh, no, that that part is well, you know we all have elements of ourself, right? Different hats we wear depending on what positions we're taking. So his conversion, which was slow and questioning, he takes a lot longer than I do, or than I did. Uh, my my uh, my background is different from his in that I kind of grew up in a Christian home, and I was really bored with God. And I love you, God, and all of that, but no offense, you're kind of boring. And a friend of mine challenged me, and he said, my problem was I was only part of a Christian, that if I gave God my whole life, things would be a lot more exciting. So I did that. I was going into pre-med. I had that all figured out. I was going to be a dentist, but I made this promise always to say yes to God, always, regardless of how uninformed he may be of the situation. And then my freshman year in college, I'm watching the fourth movie of my life. I grew up in the mountains of Washington State. I had seen Pinocchio, um, The Parent Trap, and Pollyanna. Now I'm watching the fourth movie of my life, and its title, The Godfather. And I'm seeing people getting massacred and blood and I walked out of that theater numb, telling God that he needed to wake up and smell the coffee, that there's incredible power in story. And every time I told him that he should raise somebody up like that, it sort of kept bouncing back at me. And, no, 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 come on, I'm trying to be serious here. But it just kept coming back at me. So after about 6 weeks, I changed my major to filmmaking. I didn't even know how to watch a movie, let alone make one. No film school in the country would take me. I wouldn't take me. The only school that would take me was in Rome, Italy. And newsflash, they don't speak English in Rome, Italy.
Oh,
And I know and the other thing was I have a language disability. So now I'm in a country whose language I can't speak, studying a subject I know nothing about. But I got to tell you, I wasn't bored.
I
I
bet not. Did you learn Italian? Parli
uh,
l'italiano?
one phrase.
Okay.
Uh, Dove, I think it's Dove Gabinetto. Where's the bathroom? Which you kind of need to know. But yeah, no, it was a joke, but I wasn't bored. Moved back to the Pacific Northwest, got married, moved down here to Southern California to become a rich and famous film director. Discovered they already had a few of those. They didn't need any more, but thanks for playing. And proceeded to live off macaroni and cheese, going, God, I promised to say yes, but I mean, and it's been exciting, but now what? And I was directing a play in Los Angeles, and this TV producer calls up and he says, would you like to write for our TV show? And I asked him, do you pay? And he said, yes. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Scared to death because I got C's and D's in my one writing class in college. I knew that was one thing God would never ask me to do. But so, of course, he did. And I wrote the world's worst TV show. It was so bad. I threw something at the TV set when it was my own show. But I figured, okay, so I wrote a second one. They didn't buy it. A third one, they didn't buy it. And, we're back to macaroni and cheese. And then I get a call from an uninformed publisher back east who says, Bill, we understand that you're a famous Christian TV writer. Go on. And if you could just take time from your busy schedule of starving, um, could you write a book for us? And I said, well, do you pay? They said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Hung up the phone, broke into tears, going, my, what? And I wrote the world's worst book.
Is that the title?
Well, it should have been, but and I've been to eBay and I've bought up every copy, so nobody will ever know. Hot shots will come to the house for interview. Good Morning America came to the house a while back. It's like, well, tell us about your first book, Mr. Myers. And my answer is always the same, and that's next question, please.
Mhm.
Was terrible, but it was the only game in town. So I wrote a second book for whatever reason. They bought it, and then a third book and a fourth book, and that's pretty much how I've stumbled into this whole thing. I've I picked up 80 national and international awards, sold 8 million books. And every time I start to believe my own press, the Lord reminds me how dependent I am to keep faking everybody out and writing stuff that for whatever reason people like reading. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. I'm a crybaby, I'm a coward, and not very good. But I sure spent a lot of time with the Lord trying to fix those things.
That's really encouraging because it's one thing to hear people's success stories, but you really want to hear how people handled and overcame adversity and failure. You can think of just countless stories in American history of somebody failing and failing and failing again, and it's only because they kept trying that they succeeded on the very last time for which we remember them for all the wonderful things that they did. So your story
Yeah,
is particularly cooler because it's not like really you picking yourself up by your bootstraps, but God and his faithfulness continuing to direct you and open up opportunities so that you could use the gifts that he's giving you for his glory.
yeah, it's me whimpering into, and that probably is where the similarity of the character in the book comes from. He's a reluctant, well, actually, by the end of the series, he becomes a hero, but totally through no fault of his own. He stumbles into greatness. So yeah, yeah, that's well put. I The key to my success. I'm the kid, I'm the geek in the back of God's classroom, and God says, "Okay, I've got a great idea." Of course, I won't tell you what it is because that's kind of how I run the universe. But do I have any volunteers? I'm in the back of the room going, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh," and poor God's going, "Anybody? Any? Ooh, ooh, please, any? Ooh, okay, Bill, come on." So yeah, the key to my success is I keep saying yes, and he keeps raising the stakes. And I got to tell you, I haven't been bored since I made that promise. I've been scared to death, but he's never let me down. And certainly, a lot of failures and stuff that's comes with life. But I would never. I mean, if I had my way, I'd be inside your mouth right now with sharp objects, drilling as a dentist. By the grace of God, he, for both of us, he had other plans. So I guess my encouragement to anybody is just that. Say yes to God, even though you're sure he doesn't know what he's doing. And you just kind of stumble into success, either success by the world standards, but absolutely success by your own relationship with God.
And what about Will Thomas then? So could you maybe walk through the beginning of his journey? Maybe where that launch pad into a life of faith, when these encounters with Jesus start. Maybe pick out some of the areas where it overlaps with your own testimony, your own story.
Oh, I just hmm. He's a reluctant agnostic. He's a professor, so of course he's pretty sure he knows everything, um, except for the fact that his marriage has failed, and except for the fact that his 14-year-old niece decides that she's going to live with him, and the fact that she's about 6 months pregnant makes it even more interesting. So a lot of times when I'm writing, I try to create comedic situations and comedic characters so I can always go back to that. So we have this poor guy who has no idea how to relate to women, now having to raise a 14-year-old pregnant niece. And so the sparks and the humor are there. And as a lifeline, Jesus shows up in his life from time to time. And they have these wonderful off the record conversations. Sometimes Jesus pulls him back in time, and the two of them watch a biblical account happen. Because Will thinks, poor Will, it's all about him, and nobody's ever been like this. And Jesus kind of goes, well, take a look at this one. And then they'll watch some part of Jesus's life or some other saint's life as our character is just And nobody else, of course, nobody else sees Jesus. Nobody else sees Will when he's in the biblical times, which creates again some interesting stress when they wonder who Will's talking to, or when they wonder who Jesus is talking to. So yeah, so he starts off as an agnostic, and in the first book, he's overwhelmed by the love of Christ. Eventually, uh, then the second book deals with his temptations to take shortcuts to water down his faith. Hence, the book is called, I believe, Temptation. The third book, he learns about prayer as the niece gives birth to a child, to a girl, of course, because somebody he can't relate to again. But and she has some heart defects, so he struggles with prayer, and Jesus just takes him through the Lord's Prayer gradually and showing him how each verse in the Lord's Prayer is important. Fourth book deals with now he's finally starting to get some balance. He's not falling down quite so often with the Lord. So he's put in a situation where he has to start giving, where he starts serving. And then the fifth book, he's moving into a position now of seeing the inconsistencies in Christianity and having to, against his nature, call out some brothers and sisters on their behavior. And then in the sixth book, he rises up against his will uh, and stumbles into a heroic situation, which I won't tell you about because I don't want to ruin the book. But yeah, so it's a journey from doubter to hero of the faith, and I try to find all the potholes for him to fall down in the process.
Ones that we would fall into.
Yeah, yeah. So when you ask, is it like me? Yeah, it's like me. Is it like you? Probably. So he is the everyman. Frank Peretti, an author, said just that. He said, "This is like every Christian in the world. This is what we go through."
And that's a great segue into my next question. How is Christian fiction not fiction? Does that question make sense? Like,
Hmm.
yeah, the events didn't exactly happen in real life, but they correspond to reality in ways that, no other like brand of fiction is really going to do.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. A lot of people will say, "Well, why don't you write for the general market?" And I have no interest in car chases and steamy romances and whatever the general market is. My interest is our hunger for a deeper relationship with God. So that's my agenda. Um, I would turn the question back to you and say, why did Jesus spend so much time teaching in parables? Uh, there are universal truths about our crippledness as his children that you can expose uh, in a fiction as opposed to covering a person's 80 years of a person's life to make 2 or 3 points. In fiction, you can kind of condense it like he did with the parables and draw out a truth. He could have spent a lot more time giving us facts and figures, but most of his teaching was through fiction, through parables.
What does your own personal writing process look like as you bring this out?
Well, like I said, it's changed. In the old days, before this series, it was I would uh, outline probably about a month before I'd even start to write. So I know wherever because as a movie script writer, you can't go down rabbit trails. You have to be very structured and not waste 20 minutes. Everything has to be there for a reason. So that's always been the way I've worked, except in this case. In this case, yeah, I know where I'm going, but a lot of it is, like I said, just turning and going, help, now what? And the stuff that would bubble up is of probably more eternal value than anything I could have dreamed up. My process is I spend a lot of time with the Lord in the morning. Uh, about 6 people in the world have my cell phone number. Everybody else has a landline that I get to eventually. And I'll write for 2 hours in the morning, um, rewriting what I thought was so great the day before. When I read it, I go, "Oh, this is terrible." So the first 2 hours I spend rewriting what I thought was great, but is really terrible. I take about an hour break, come back, and I write 2 hours of fresh material. And then another break. And then my last 2 hour segment is rewriting what I rewrote the day before that I thought that I fixed. And it's just a little better and it needs a lot of work. So I leapfrog like that. And then I go back over it several times. I usually rewrite about or polish and rewrite about 6 or 7 times before it's fit for human consumption.
Man, that's really impressive. Just like the level of discipline and tinkering with sentences. What about an elevator pitch for Rendezvous with God? Like, hey, you've got 30 seconds with somebody who has no idea who you are. How do you encourage that person to take a look at this new series?
So the question is elevator pitch. Elevator pitch is an agnostic who has no time for Jesus, accidentally gets pulled back into New Testament times to have off the record conversations with Jesus that helps him get through his bungling life in the 21st century.
And
Oh,
just
I
one,
got
oh yeah, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
10 more seconds.
Yeah.
And it's funny. There, done.
Well, this is wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation, Bill, and really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you would want to share with potential people that could read the book, or just anything along those lines? Anything else that we didn't cover today, but is on your heart that you want to get out there?
I think you did a great job of covering it. Again, going back to your very first question, the reason I write this series is to draw the reader closer into the personality and character of Jesus, not necessarily the philosopher that we corner him as being, but as a guy who just happens to be God the Son.